There's some signs tonight that President Trump might not have quite the same level of control over congressional Republicans that he used to, and more of those Republicans seem willing to buck him than ever, at least when it comes to surveillance. Those doubts reemerged this week when the president failed to whip House Republicans to pass an 18-month renewal of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. In the end, 20 Republican lawmakers voted against it, and Congress ended up extending the law for just 10 days while they hash out what it ultimately will be. Joining us now is Alex Shepard. He's senior editor at The New Republic. So, Alex, I find this to be pretty significant in that 20 Republicans, it's not nothing, especially when you consider the War Powers Resolution. You only had Massey defect, and you only had another Republican vote present. So this fight, Donald Trump was famously very against FISA and surveillance powers when he thought it was used against him. But now that he's in the executive, he loves it.
Yeah, I mean,
Can you explain just what this battle tells us about the state of the GOP right now?
Well, I think that this is the story of Trump's second term, which is that, he complained about FISA. He claimed that he had been he had his wires tapped in Trump Tower and that he had been targeted in all these ways. And then, of course, as soon as he gets into office, he wants to use these kind of powers that he was criticizing against his own enemies. He wants to be able to wield these things. It's a system where there is sort of surveillance for thee, but not for me. And this is how he's been operating here. But I think what we're seeing is that there is a sort of principled opposition to FISA, particularly to Section 702, which emerged after 9/11 and sweeps up American personal data in it. So, what we're seeing is that there is actually a bipartisan majority within the House of Representatives that wants warrants attached to FISA requests, which I think is a pretty reasonable thing here. But I think what we're seeing, which is far more interesting, is that Trump has always been able to basically get people in line when he wants something. And what we're seeing here right now is that Mike Johnson basically called the kind of literally an 11th hour vote in the middle of the night on Friday night, and he couldn't do it. It was a huge humiliation for him. But what we're also seeing here, too, is that there are factions within the GOP that are starting to awaken, and they're fighting back against.
What do you think is waking them up? Is it that because everything is so bad and the polling is cratering, that there's just like an opening here? He's a lame duck president, so we can start slowly pushing back on certain things that we maybe do have principled stances on, or how do you read it all?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is that Congress just isn't doing very much right now. That's the other. This is a historically
a lot of vacation.
Yes, and so there's not a lot of priority. So if you are someone who cares a great deal, which a handful of Republicans are, about things like civil liberties or Section 702 of FISA, there is an opportunity to move here. But I also think what we're starting to see is a sense that the MAGA movement will outlast President Trump, who's about to turn 80 years old. But people are trying to jockey to see who's actually going to control it and what the priorities of that movement are. Meanwhile, with Trump himself, what you're seeing is that it's just a pure cult of personality, right? Particularly as the 250th anniversary comes up, as the 2026 World Cup. He is mostly just interested in doing whatever he wants.
But, Alex, one of the things you were just talking about from sort of within Congress, the thing that's fascinating to me about this MAGA ecosphere sort of shattering is, or at least cracking, is with the folks we're seeing from the outside, the tastemakers on the right, if you will, the Tucker Carlsons, the Marjorie Taylor Greens. They are now turning on Trump. I'm trying to understand what is the common thread there, if you've been able to identify. How do you read those tea leaves that you've had some of the most stalwart cornerstones of this movement now say, we're not messing with you anymore?
Well, I think that what you see is, you look back to 2016, right? The populist right at this point is still a pretty nascent phenomenon. It's just starting to form. 10 years later now, it is a full-fledged movement. It's not strong enough to take over the entire GOP, but it exists. And I think that if you are someone who sees yourself as being part of that movement and not, say, part of the Republican establishment or the future of the Republican Party, what you're seeing is an administration that is in many ways abandoning the kind of principles, quote unquote, that Trump espoused in 2016. So if you look at something like Iran, right, if you're someone who believes, that the U.S. should be, a non-interventionist in terms of its foreign policy, then that's a huge betrayal. And I think they're also looking at this in a frankly opportunistic way that, this is a president whose approval rating is dipped below 40%. You look at the cost of gas, right? You look at the situation with the Strait of Hormuz that is both open and closed at the same time. And I think that they're seeing that, this is not an administration where things are going to get better. So they're starting to make long-term plays, and they can. If you're a member of Congress, you're up for election in November. You still need Trump to some extent to not be tweeting about you all the time like he is with Thomas Massie.
Who do you think represents the future? Is it J.D. Vance? He very obviously wants that job. Is it Secretary Marco Rubio, who seems to be really actually quite a talented politician lately, just is able to avoid every situation you don't want to be in right now, like at a UFC fight instead of, in Pakistan trying to negotiate an end to this war conveniently. Who do you think is going to inherit all of this?
I think that, the question right now, I think the schism or the fight between Rubio and Vance is very interesting to me, because Rubio in some ways represents more of a continuity. He obviously was in the Senate before Trump's political career took off. And I think if you're looking for someone who can kind of put a, updated sheen on kind of the evolution of the Republican Party, that's Rubio. But, if you want to talk about crack-ups within the Republican Party, I think that looking at Vance's handling of the Iran war is very interesting. Right after that conflict began, almost every news outlet in the country has a story that says, oh, J.D. Vance is kind of not all the way in favor of this. And I think you're doing that part, maybe Vance is principled, but also I think, Vance is looking at the future. He's one of the most opportunistic politicians in the country right now. And I think that he was betting that this war would be a disaster. It was something that he did not want his fingerprints on, and now they're on it. But looking at the sort of conversation about Tucker Carlson, these other kind of influencers, Vance, I think, is more aligned with that. I think he is someone who is more likely to say, the Trump administration, we kind of didn't get all these things done, and we didn't do it because we abandoned these kind of core MAGA principles that I will take up. Whereas Rubio, I think, is going to argue more that he's a sort of steward, right, a continuity of Donald Trump's legacy.
Alex Shepard, thank you so much.
Thank you.